day, everyone. We hope to engage all of you in a heated debate, in a bit of argument, and a lot of discussion, and a lot of thinking leading up to action to really just find out how can we make design thinking matter for India? How can design thinking play a much larger role than it is currently playing? And the panelists have already agreed to disagree. And we hope you will join our disagreements. And we will reach some consensus, and even if we don't, hey, at least we've started talking about it. Let me introduce the panelists to you. We have Dinesh Sonak, who is the Indian ambassador of THNK, the Amsterdam School of Creative Leadership, and the co-founder of the Saaf India Foundation. We have Mr. Atul Punj, who is chairman Punj Lloyd Group India, building infrastructure all around the world, and I'm very curious about his interest in design thinking. We have Shammy Jacobs. He's one of the graduates of the THNK School of Creative Leadership from Amsterdam and is also the co-founder of the Saaf India Foundation. We have Ton Wendhoven. He is an urban planner and he's involved with the Delhi 2050 project and is also, interestingly, an advisor to governments in the space of urban planning and infrastructure. My first topic or question is, it is 2013 here in India, and we can perhaps use design thinking to radically reimagine our future as a country that is at the same time really old, and we have a lot of heritage, we have a lot that is our own, which is very different from the rest of the world. And at the same time, we are the youngest nation in the world, and we will be the youngest nation in the world for the next 20 to 30 years. How can we use design thinking? In this context, how would we define it differently? And what will be the imperatives? What are the ways in which we can use it? I'm going to throw this question up to the panel.
Well, I'm happy to start, Sonia. To me, design thinking is about bringing positive change to society by basically using a mindset that is very collaborative, working together with all sorts of disciplines and experts, that places humans at the center of the whole process of creative problem solving, and that is also about the passion and the purpose to bring that change.
I think design thinking India is, what is interesting about design when you are young is you take everything for granted. It's with products, it's with flowers, it's with everything, the car you're driving with your parents. And you don't know that somebody actually designed it. And I think the same holds for a country and for a culture. That you think that everything is self-evident. And it is as it is, you cannot change it. Whereas the reality is that it has been changed over the years. And it is possible to change it. The only thing is that you have to create this awareness that change is possible. And then you need to have to make a lot of people believe in this change. And then you have to tackle it from top to down and from down to top on all levels, because it implies not only legislation, it implies governance, education, money, financial models, everything.
I just want to say what it's not. It's not about a product. And all of us here are brilliant. We're all extremely creative. But I think our world is going so fast that we sometimes forget to see what's going on the sides. And to me, design thinking is like taking your mind or taking your brain to the gym. We all have muscles. But for some of us, the muscles are predefined and looks good. For some of us, we are a little more rounded and we need to go to the gym. So it's like, okay, if I want to work on my triceps, I use a specific machine. If I want to work on my stomach, I use a specific machine. So, but there's no real order in which machine you want to use. And design thinking is just that. It's a toolkit for you to say, okay, I have this problem and I don't know how to figure it out. And it gives you these great tools that say, okay, let me get into the shoes of the person I'm going to address the solution for. You use a specific tool, it gets you there. If you want to brainstorm, you use another tool, it gets you there. And it's just something that stretches your mind and gets the most out of your brain. And maybe in 5 years, it could be another toolkit that you get.
My comments will be more in the Indian context. You know, India is a society and an economy, a culture that's really been evolving since independence. We've really found our own space, and we've been trying to develop our urban spaces since then to provide the basic amenities to the average citizen. Unfortunately, the quality of the design thinking that went into that process was completely absent. So when you look around you, you have cities without pavements, you have 385 deaths of people by head injuries every day, 3,000 people go into a coma. So basically, I don't think there's really been focus on seeing what does the human being really require other than electricity, water, and sewage. These seem to be the simple, basic, underlying fundamentals around which all our planning has been done. The second issue, I think, really is that there's always been this belief that good design is expensive. As a result of which, any time that a proposition was given, automatically was pushed back, other than some iconic projects that were close to some leader's heart, who had an ability to control a budget, to influence thinking, or get approvals in place. Generally, everything has really been run on the low bidder concept. So an architect is given a chance to bid on a particular project, and it is his price that really determines whether he gets it or not.
Right.
And the same thing translates through to the contractor, to the materials being used, to the services that are being used. So you end up with the kind of things that you end up with in this country. I don't need to elaborate on that. Yeah. Recently, I was with the minister of ours on a delegation in Dubai, and he was complimenting the quality of infrastructure.
Right.
I said, you know, it's ironical that you were saying that, because 80% of the workers and 80% of the engineers and project managers are from India that have developed this. So it's within our zone of competence, but it's not in something that we are allowed to do in our own environment. So I think the environmental fix has to happen. And if I may take a minute more, I'd basically say that I don't see the government changing on its own. But I do believe in the last few years, you've had this complete upsurge of use of social media. I believe if people in colonies and cities, etc., can be given an option by saying, this is what they are planning, but if you do it this way, all right, at the same cost, you can get something that is dramatically different, much better, much more suited to the local environment, and is Indian. It's not a knockoff of a HOK tabletop book, which typically you see in most of the construction you see around India. So I think we need to energize, educate, make people aware that there are options available at reasonable price points, which are not going to dent the budget of the local government or the state government or the central government. And we will, over a period of time, start seeing a better, improved, designed India around the individual.
Yeah. Perhaps there is not even an understanding of what design thinking really is. Is it about form? Is it about meaning? Is it about a collaborative approach? Maybe a lot of that is missing, and you know, that's what I'm hearing. That basic understanding is missing. So maybe a good approach to take today, since we're all here, we have now the best technologies available, the same technologies available all over the world are available to us here in India. There's all of this open source, and you know, all of this is available. We have the best minds, we have the resources. So maybe it's a good time to ask the audience and ask the panelists that if you had the choice and you could work on any one very important problem or challenge, you know, what would that be? What would it be that you would commit your resources, your time, and you think that it needs to be worked on? So in which case we cannot expect the government to do this. Maybe we need to take a collaborative approach. Maybe we need to offer ourselves to do it. So what would be that one problem or challenge? And I would like to ask the audience that as well. I think you would already have got these post-its with you. We will take 3 challenges. What do you think in the context of India are 3 problems or challenges that need design thinking the most? The panelists have already agreed that they will look at this. We will help make a plan. And if we get your inputs as well, we can fight over what those 3 challenges could be. We'll put it all up for you to see. And we could then work towards solving those challenges with design thinking. So if we can take a minute to write down that one challenge that you think or one problem that should be worked on. Yes, please. How to design sensibility, responsibility in people for people. Fabulous. Designing open public spaces. We have lots of open public spaces, but they're a mess. So possibly we need to design better open public spaces. Anybody else? Would you like to talk about it, please?
India seems to be one as a country, but the moment you move away from state to state, there are cultural barriers, and because design is an integrated part of our lives. So put them together is one of the biggest challenges.
However, Shammy, if you're saying that design thinking starts from what people want, what if people want Singapore in their city? They want something like Singapore in their city.
Yes.
What if somebody building it wants? How do you unify this? Aesthetic is a very, very important
Absolutely. So
question.
the problem is not recreating another Singapore, but the problem is how do we get us to agree on what we want? So
I think if I can just, elaborate on that. What is Singapore? Singapore is a clean, efficient, well-planned city. That's it. Now, the design contest can sit around those realities, that is what citizens deserve. They want to have a place which is green, they want to have a place which is safe, they want to have a place where they can walk, they can go in the park, in an environment that is clean, maintained neatly all the time. And everything else sits around those basic human needs.
But do we get into the depth of understanding that? We just look at the surface and that's what we go with. And that's what our leaders go with.
So that's
how do you...
I think that's what we'll unravel as we take this journey of creative thinking and design thinking, is what is the underlying need, right?
Who is the we, Shammy?
So,
Who's,
exactly.
We can sit here and think, but
so
who's going to take this into action?
Decide who the
because
we
thinking is nothing without the action.
So when you, if you are an individual who's thinking of a problem and want to make that change, you decide who that we needs to be based on what your central idea is. So you create your we. It could be the government. It could be the person who cleans the offices. It could be the citizens. It could be somebody in Singapore. So you decide on the we, and you decide who gets the most strength in this interaction with, and then get them all together, right? And then you'll find out that your ultimate need is not giving the people another Singapore or giving a people, because we are great at doing that once we know what we want and once we all agree. So our problem, ultimately our need, is how can we agree on what we want? And you go about thinking on how to...
So in the context of India, what according to you is the biggest problem or challenge that we need to work on individually? If you could share that, it would be interesting.
I think there is one thing. I think it is very interesting that India is a multicultural society, but it's a different thing to say that you should work from, try to find out what is your identity and then make products accordingly or develop a style accordingly. I think there are two things in life, in culture, which is, one is that you have differences, different backgrounds, so different styles and cultures. The second is that there is a lot of exchange going on. The importance of the Silk Route for India is tremendous. And with the increase in infrastructure, the increase in mobility in India, but also between India and other countries, we've seen a presentation of an Indian designer from an Indian background living in London. I think those hybrid developments, new developments, are extremely important, and I would be very careful not to try and find out some Indian style, because then you end up in the sales version. You want to be ahead of things, and I think this whole conference is a very good example of how people from different backgrounds come together and exchange ideas.
What do you think is the biggest problem or challenge?
So, yeah, me personally, it's not something very sexy. It's the way, as a country or as a big community, how we treat our common spaces. It's always bugged me. It's given rise to a deep purpose that was always inside me of how we take care of our homes, we take care of our cars, but we don't really take care of our roads. We don't take care of our beaches, our forests, our rivers. So that is the challenge that I've identified, that we would go through this complex situation and try to unravel that. Because municipal solid waste is one of the biggest challenges we as a country will face. It's not top of mind to citizens, it's not top of mind to companies as yet. There are other things about that. But I think I see it as a window to India of how we look outwards through a clean environment and how the outside looks inward to us as who we are as a country. And it's going to be one of the strongest things that hold us together as a society in terms of dealing with health issues and in dealing with how the globe perceives us as a country. We could have the most sophisticated technology, we could have the most fantastic metro systems, airports, but if it's messy, so it's probably not top of mind for most of us, but that's something.
A clean India.
A clean public space. I think we're great at keeping our own spaces clean, but how do we get together as a country to take ownership of our country as a whole?
I think a lack of civic sense. We lack that completely. And as you said, that we have our homes clean, our clothes clean, our car clean, but we don't mind if we're driving along to toss a cigarette out of the window. So I think that's. But coming back to your fundamental question, what do you need to do? I think first is to get two Indians to agree to do the same thing. Okay, everybody has the right solution. Okay, and I mean, I joke, I said, in America you tell somebody you do this, to produce this, to this quality, and so many pieces in this much time, they'll say, yes, sir. In India, you have a consensus debate, and then you say, okay, this is what you're going to do, the same things.
Yeah.
The first two words will be yes, sir. The third word will be but.
Yeah.
And the debate starts all over
Right.
again. So I think that is probably one of the biggest problems. No two Indians like to agree, and each one wants to have the last word. Sorry.
You just had the last word.
So in my opinion, I see it as a leadership challenge and also as an education challenge. So in order to find solutions for these bigger problems, societal problems, and challenges in our public spaces, I believe you need people who have a vision that can bring together many other visions and many other different people. So public governance, corporate innovators, social entrepreneurs, people in education, bring them together and collectively start designing a solution. And in order for this type of leadership to develop on a larger scale, I think education may be the start of the solution. So India has some of the best schools in the world, the technology schools, but also the business and management schools, and then the design schools. But I don't see a lot of exchange between these schools and have programs where actually a designer from one school, an engineer from other, and a student in business or management get together and learn and develop these solutions. So I would like to see more on an educational level, more collaboration between all these various disciplines and together tackle these challenges.
But what is the one big challenge according to you? What is the one big challenge that really bothers you?
Well, together with Shammy, I started the Saaf India Foundation, which is about designing creative solutions for the waste challenge in India. And that's a challenge that I commit about half of my time to right now.
I think it's important to stop talking and start doing.
Right.
I think that's one, take home that I get. We have enough of these exchanges. We have enough of these exchanges at these so-called high level, but very little comes out of it. And I think where we could start making a difference is if we take in each city or some cities examples, and we say, okay, this is a public space that we collectively are going to energize the design people, the construction people, the local population, and others who are involved in influencing that decision, and make it happen. And start making these examples of collaborative initiatives on a real-time basis, visible to people, which will be used, become examples, be talked about, the media will spread the word, social media will step in, and it starts resulting in actual delivery.
Okay.
So I think the key thing is we need to find a solution where we are able to create groups of people in maybe 2 or 3 different cities to start with, let's not bite off more than we can chew, and deliver something.
Okay.
Okay? And use that as an example to policymakers as to this is what can be done if you're so minded.
So that's a great idea. So based on all the feedback that we get from the audience now on the challenges they think they need to work on and the post-its, this whole lot of post-its we'll collect, can we find a pattern there? And we'll commit to work on that. Shammy, Dinesh, myself, will take some of your time as well. And actually take those 3 challenges forward in the fashion that you've mentioned. And I think if we can make that commitment, at least we've moved forward. And
from industry, I can commit that we will be willing to partner with you on some of these initiatives, and I can push my peers to also participate in these initiatives. So you won't find the industry lacking.
Okay.
Okay.
There's just one thing that we need to reflect on. When we are looking at design thinking at this scale, which is the scale that India is, where a large part of humanity lives, and which is complex because it's a paradox. It's always a paradox. It's, you know, we have access to the best minds, and yet we have the biggest problems. We're very far away from the Millennium Development Goals. We have inequality. The basic problems are not sorted. We have gender inequality. We have, lack of basic infrastructure. In that context, as we move on, what are the imperatives that this audience should reflect on? What are the values? Some of it that one has seen coming out of these discussions are that we need to try and collaborate and have a consensual approach. We need to look at the crafts of this country and see how we can take that forward. We need to keep the skills and the knowledge that we have. What are the other values that we can reflect on today?
I think it's incredibly important to cherish and develop the streets, because that's where exchange between people takes place. And at the moment, actually, I see a trend which is not going in the right direction. 30% of the commuters in India are pedestrians. And I see that roads are enlarged and pedestrian spaces are annihilated. And also the same goes for the bicycles. And I see that everywhere in the world, grown-up economies and cities, they have started the battle against cars. They kick out the cars, they improve the quality of life in the cities, because they found out that that is the most important for economic development. And I don't see a lot of energy in this
we've actually
field.
tried to pick up the Curitiba model and apply it in the Indian context, but it doesn't seem to work. So maybe we need to develop our own
I think it is
models.
extremely important to be very clear that the pedestrian is incredibly important, incredibly important, especially in combination with the public transport systems. And this is where the different remarks that have been made, I don't want to say a but, I totally agree. I think they are complementary, because you need to take action, but you also need to be clear about your goal, and you need to use all the social media that you can get. But you also need to be very clear about the direction.
So you're saying that people at all levels matter?
Absolutely.
So it's not just the guy with the fancy car, but it's also the woman dropping her child to
You are
school
talking
walking.
about the inequality in society.
Right.
I think one of the main problems in inequality is that the poor people have very little means for mobility, so they cannot reach jobs.
Right.
For on this level, the pedestrian and the bicycle is extremely important. Also, public transport. So you need to think a mobility strategy which is based on the pedestrian, but includes all modes of transport. And you need to make fantastic urban spaces and nodes where all these networks connect.
Which is where somebody else had mentioned that we need open public spaces.
Yeah.
I think one of the points that all the Indians in this room should be minded of. The leader of the government in 1985 passed a comment, which I mentioned in the back. 15 paise, 1 5 paise of every development rupee goes where it's intended. His son has now passed a comment, 7 paise reaches. So a cost of delivery of development capital of government projects effectively is 93%. Okay? It's a shocking number, 93% by admission of the senior-most politician in this country. So that is, I think, manifested itself in the Yamuna and Ganga action programs where we talk about cleaning up the rivers, where they spent $3 to $4 billion in the last 15 years. And both the rivers, which we consider holy and go and drink the water when we're dying, etc., sprinkled on our heads, is filth. Okay, so it just goes to show that the money is there, the thinking is there in many cases, but the delivery system of a lot of these solutions, okay, is just completely raped by the delivery, the people involved in the process.
So is transparency something that we're talking about, is having a plan and having an outcome-based approach? These are things that we need to talk about in the Indian context?
There's some things I wouldn't like to talk about in an open audience.
But I think that...
we'll talk about it backstage.
But the social media are, of course, extremely important in creating more transparency. And to have, there are so many minds, you see that all over the world now with the social media. There are so many intelligent people that also have access to the right information. And they can make, especially the middle class, informed so that action is taken.
So we use technology that exists to make the process more democratic, more open, and we push from below, take an inside-out approach versus a top-down approach, and we push from below for far more transparency, far more collaboration, I would imagine.
No, I think the change will start with the courage of each individual to try to find his or her personal passion and a purpose and start delivering that change, and maybe fail a lot of times, but at least try and learn from the failure in order to bring something meaningful. So the courage is really should be there.
And I think we have great examples of stuff that's actually happening, and really fantastic, that boggles the minds of the rest of the world. And one thing is scale. The scale, if we do something right, and there's a big if, but there are examples out there. If we do something right, it's something that I think only India as a country can handle. And you know, we've got, there are so many things we are number one, you know, like the milk production in the world. I mean, Amul's a great example, a very humble example of what they've done in getting, you know, the user need of a farmer to becoming the largest milk producer in the world in such an understated Indian way. Fantastic. Again, I go back to my inspirational platform of the Indian Railways. I remember when I was growing up, buying a ticket for the Indian Railways was such a nightmare. You know, you go stand in line and you finally reach the window. It's not the right counter, so I had to go back and stand in the next line, which is the right train, and I would get 3 different sheets of paper with carbon copies in it. It was a nightmare. And then going into the computerized system of reserved tickets, which was only 7%, and then making the entire ticketing computerized. Today, if you go into the VT station or any station, it's a breeze, buying a ticket. I mean, although in our minds, if I talk to my friends and colleagues, they say, oh my God, you're traveling by train, you're going to book yourself your own ticket. But actually, if you go experience it, it's fantastic. And when you look at the sheer numbers that the CRIT, the Central Railways Information Department, have handled, that solution does not exist in the world, the kind of infrastructure. So we've designed it. So I think we can give the world the way we handle scale. That to me would be what India can give the world on how to handle scale.
Actually, there is the complexity that we deal with is mind-boggling, and some of the failures come out of that, but some of the successes that emerge out of that are really what we can give to a brave new world that is being created out there. You know, there are people who've moved on from, for instance, Bruce, in his new book, which is called Creative Intelligence, has moved on from design thinking to the values that are there in creativity, and is offering that to the world as a democratic thing. So, which means that you don't have to even include designers. As long as you take the collaborative approach, as long as you reframe a problem into an opportunity, you can still solve the biggest challenges. And in my personal experience, we've actually looked at a model which shifts the focus of design thinking from people's needs to dreams. And that as a model has been picked up by the world. So I think what we need to commit to is making these fresh new models that come out of our experience, out of the complexity.
Bike lanes.
Right.
Hero Cycle is the biggest bike manufacturer in the world.
Right.
You know, so with an entity like Hero, with an entity like City Planning, getting together and create.
Yeah, and create
So
these
I think
multiple wins. You know, if you have many different kinds of people, many different kinds of stakeholders, we can create multiple wins, and maybe that's what we need to sort of work towards. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for all your inputs. Thank you, everyone.